Namaskaram, welcome to episode number 82 of Daily Global Insights. I'm your host Sree Iyer. Today is the 25th of January. Joining me is our guest host, Sridhar Chityalaji. Sridharji and I have been doing this thing now for 82 weekdays, give or take a day or two when we did some specials. So it's been a privilege and honor to bring you the latest breaking news. We are always a day ahead, sometimes even 2 days ahead of what happens in the world. So thanks for joining, and hopefully you can subscribe, get more people on board on this program. Sridharji, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskar and good morning to all. Another bright week and lots of things that are likely to happen this week in DC, around the world, and also the Davos Virtual Summit is underway.
Yes, indeed it is. And before we jump into that, we just want to give a quick clarification about an interview that Joe Biden or President Biden gave to New York Times. And there was one word that the narrative in that got changed on the online version of New York Times. Sridharji, can you please expand on that and Janet Yellen's stance on where she wants to take the country?
It's very simple. I think people have asked the question, is it could or couldn't,
Or would or wouldn't?
would or wouldn't have reversed the 360 billion or close to 400 billion dollars of the tariffs, the import restrictions. Something it got flipped, and so today, as it stands, when you go and look at the link, it says he would not have reversed until. So therefore, he is not prepared to reverse the deal and sticking to the Trump position. Below that, if you see, you say Maria Catrell, the Democrat has stated as to why he needs to, why there is a justification to remove that, because she's talking about getting back 250,000 jobs as a result of eliminating this specific clause. So there has been, I have had one or two people tweet about this, which is to state, we can't find it, you can't find it, because sometimes you have these narratives little bit changed, which is very kind of often we find it. As we observed, even in the case of President Trump forming the Patriot Party, which to some extent was being unofficially stated in the Lou Dobbs kind of show. Then there's some press made its coverage. Then Trump issued a statement through an advisor, which is to say he's not floating another party, but his focus is around the 2022 midterm elections. So there is this kind of changes, either whether it is narrative and media driven, or whether these people misunderstand the statements, misinterpret the statements. It's hard. So we'll try to keep a very close eye on this. I also saw, now I don't see it, around Huawei and ZTE technologies. I don't see it now, but I saw it. I also saw that in the whitehouse.gov, right? So you find some of these things come and go. So that's the clarification on that. With regard to Janet Yellen, both the links are available in her earlier kind of comments. She has indicated that we have enough financial tools available to deal with the China issues around intellectual property, legal enforcement, tariffs and subsidies, and whole host of issues, including human rights and border violations, etc., etc. So then, subsequent in the second, she made a comment, which is to say that we have the tools. We can't take any unilateral decisions on China. We must work with our allies to find a resolution to the issue. So there seems to be a lot of such changes as far as China is concerned. So either people are working the politics behind the scene, where you see these narratives getting changed. Now, similarly, you find, just to kind of close out this discussion, you find that on one side, as of today, they have taken a strong stance against China imposing sanctions on Mike Pompeo and other Trump officials. They've taken a strong stance on Uyghur. They've taken a strong stance on Taiwan, Taiwan borders being breached. Whether that stand persists, we don't know. But expect these kinds of changes in the narrative as well as the verbiage as the time goes on.
Thank you, sir. Yesterday, there was a verbal spat between George Stephanopoulos and Senator Rand Paul about the elections. And George Stephanopoulos kept trying to pin Senator Rand Paul down to say, is the election done or not? Do you think there was a the election were the elections rigged or not? He was trying to get a yes or no question, and Rand Paul really let the fur fly. We are going to give you a link to that conversation. It is on YouTube, so you can take a look at it after you watch this video. But what are your thoughts? Because Rand Paul really hit home when he said, in my days of journalism, the media, the anchor or the host would take both points of view and then let the people decide. Whereas he said, look, you've already taken the leftist point of view. What is the point in even having this conversation? So there was a lot of war of words going on between the two of them, isn't it?
Well, I think it is. And Rand Paul, I'm delighted and extremely grateful that he has taken very strong stance. In fact, he called him, you are a fool to interject yourself into this specific discussion. As a journalist, it is not your job to get in. Okay, we are talking about 6 or 7, 8 battleground states, looking at the secretaries of those states and what policy changes that they made with regard to the conduct of the elections, which is not the remit of the secretaries, but which is the remit of the state legislature. And you will observe from both from Wisconsin and other states that there was interference between between state legislatures and between the secretaries and the chief justices of the state supreme courts. Now that has been the point. Now, what everybody, it's like, differentiating wood from the forest, right? So we're not talking about reversing the election. There is a protocol United States has demonstrated, and he himself has acknowledged why I certified the election, because it is not the responsibility of the Congress to overturn an election. This was his statement in the same interview. What I'm quizzing about is this a precedence that has been created? If it is, then it is a constitutional violation that must be addressed. So the Democrats and the left-wing people get all rambled up, right? While it suits them, it suits them. When it doesn't suit them, it doesn't suit them, right? And New York Times and Washington Post kind of tops this specific list. Let me give you another example to make the point. When they look at Yogi, which everybody knows in India today, I've actually put it up on Facebook. When they look at Yogi, they call him as the RSS Hindutva fundamental leader. On the other side, when you have Joe Biden taking oath, following his Catholic Christian faith, it is talk about embracing and values and so on. So it is a very distinct case of left-wing mafia and these prejudices and biases in reporting. Even worse, when al-Baghdadi was taken out, they have New York Times put up and then they reversed after public hue and cry. So there seems to be a very specific agenda of this left-wing people, which is to continue to say, we live in delusional fantasy and our fantasy must persist, right? And you have no part. So unless people from the center and the right and stand up and say, speak the facts, okay, speak about what we are speaking rather than what you think we need to speak. Only then I think we are going to get to the truth. Today I also tweeted that India has to have a seat at the table on the same topic. They are dismissive about India while they are embracive and eulogic about Xi Jinping, right? Notwithstanding the fact everybody knows what the challenges China is creating to all around the world. So I said India must have a seat at the table as one of the top. Why I'm saying all these examples is there's biases that you see, and for the first time in an interview, that Rand Paul has taken George Stephanopoulos on, and you guys must listen to the interview.
Thank you, sir. And let's take a look at what the Department of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf, has said about the border crisis that is developing because of all these caravans. I must mention here that if you go and look up George Soros's personal wealth, he was about 34 billion, give or take a billion, and he has given away 25 billion of that money for an open society cause. I don't know what that open society means, but it kind of gives you an idea of the kind of money that the government of United States, it doesn't matter whether it's a Democratic government or the Republican government, is arrayed against. And I think that this electoral funding needs to be also looked at. When they lifted all the limits on how much money can go into funding of elections, that was a boneheaded thing. But then who am I? I'm just a simple citizen of United States. I can ramble on. So next point, the 1.9 trillion coronavirus relief, it has been facing stiff resistance from the Senate as well as from the Congress, from the Republicans, and they are trying to ask, what exactly are you spending, where are you spending? And now Biden's advisor Brian Deese is expected to meet with a bipartisan panel of senators from both Democratic and Republican sides. Now, you have been hard at work trying to decipher these numbers for us, and can you please throw a little bit of light on this?
Well, it is. It's a moving feast. The latest I can get to is $400 billion in COVID management, $440 billion plus in local and small business administration and communities. Sorry, local communities and state government administration, and of course, a small business support. This is the number that I see, 440 billion. And then it says just over $1 trillion for direct payments. Now, what does direct payments entail? Direct payment entails this $1,400. Direct payment entails this $400. Unemployment allowance, it entails this $3,600. The child support credits that they offer, plus the moratorium on the mortgages, those kinds of stuff, right? So that is the closest I can get to, which is namely just over $1 trillion, put $400 billion for COVID, and put $450 billion towards local and state. In that $400 billion, in that first category, my assumption is that also the $170 billion of the schools reopening being included, including colleges. And also for the governors, they have given a generous $5 billion discretionary spend to support. So these numbers seems to be like a moving feast. One of the great challenges of these stimulus packages, we saw this even during that, the major Obama Jobs Act, which is close to $1 trillion. One of the great problems that we have here is the challenge around the reconciling of the numbers. There's a lot of fudging that goes on. And by the way, one is stimulus getting approved. The second is accounting for the stimulus spent against specific programs and what's the outcomes that flow from it. So the only thing that we are certain in the United States is the expenses and the receipts of the US government budget and what it produces to the deficit. These are the only three numbers that seems very kind of steady and reconcilable, whereas the stimulus remains a feast. Now, I've given you the answer on the rough estimates. We'll still get to these numbers and nail it to the extent it is possible. But there is a unilateral kind of concern about the size of this stimulus, not to the left media. The left media says, give the money, give the money, give the money, because they don't care, right? So the story is give the money. I think somewhere a number of less than $1 trillion is where this is going to end up. If it ends up in $2 trillion, it'll be a miracle.
Thank you. And let's take a look at global news. The first news item is the so-called, there was a confrontation 2 or 3 days ago at Naku La between Indian and Chinese troops. And it is believed, and these newspaper reports are a little bit sketchy, and even the Indian army has come out and said, don't believe the news reports. But what we can thus far make up is that the PLA has been transgressing into Indian territory. In fact, we talked about this a few weeks ago in one of our hangouts, and that they were actually using India's newly built roads to get about there. And then once the Indian army was notified by the local villagers, the army showed up and there was hand-to-hand fight. No guns, no nothing else, and 20 PLA soldiers have been injured. We don't know how many have been injured on the Indian side. So that's all I have, sir. If you have anything additional, please feel free to share with us.
No, the only thing that I would add to your story is whenever the Chinese Foreign Ministry backtracks and then says, "Let's not." It's a fake news. Is the word that Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman has stated in the Global Times or whichever is their Chinese English publication. I think it's Global Times. They have stated that it's a fake news and is being so. Whenever the Chinese talk about fake news and don't kind of mess up, that means there is something that has happened. That's all I can kind of conclude. Whether there are 20 people who died or whether there is 40 people who are injured in skirmishes is all a matter of conjecture. But obviously, there has been an incident.
And China fires the first salvo at the Biden administration, which has made the Coast Guard as a quasi-military operation or a military wing. When did this happen? Was it something as part of the executive orders that Biden signed, or was it from Trump days that this order was passed?
This is less than 10 days old. This order was passed that because of the buildup, and as you are aware, the third time the U.S. Carrier passed through Taiwan Straits, and there's been little bits and pieces of skirmishes. As you also know, that there has been little skirmishes in the just of the Indonesian islands, especially on the fishing side. So, what China has indicated is they are now giving the marching orders to their Coast Guard effectively to fire at any vessel that they see in Chinese waters or potential Chinese waters, and which those Coast Guard believes is an imminent threat to the violation of threat and a violation of the law. Now, that simply implies that previously there is a protocol that, hey, why are you in my waters? And, you get away. That's the responsibility of the Coast Guard. People kind of respond to each other. Only when you don't respond and try to be aggressive, then you have these types of things. I think China is, in my view, on one side, they're saying, let's kind of work together. On the other side, they have this offensive posture. I don't know whether we're going to touch Taiwan. They have something similar which is going on in Taiwan. Just on Sunday, we had 13 planes flying into Taiwan, and very similarly, some incursions in Senkaku. So India is not an isolated incident. You are seeing a coordinated plan by the Chinese to flex their muscle to see who is going to blink. The only nation that has blinked, that has basically responded and stood eye to eye, is India with Chinese.
There is also some other news coming in out of India where now looks like China has prevailed upon Bhutan, and whatever India had done to try and help Bhutan stop China from entering. This happened about three years ago, I think. Now the Chinese have gotten past that, and there is a V-shaped point where you have Sikkim, Bhutan, and China meeting, and they are trying to get through there and lay a road. This is something that is still developing. We are going to have an in-depth conversation on this with just a political expert. Please look out for that in the next couple of days. Moving on, let's take a look at what ASEAN, ASEAN is about. What they are doing. They are quoting Biden as China is speeding its vaccine diplomacy. Now, looks like a lot of countries who are supposedly quote unquote friends of China are not taking up the Chinese vaccine. Is that because it's only 50% effective?
I don't know. I think that it could be 50% effective, whether there's some arm flexing going on. The most, what you call all-weather ally of China is Pakistan. Pakistan is taking Sputnik. They just have ordered the Russian Sputnik vaccine. And similarly, the other country which is going down the opposite way, which is supposed to be their ally, is Cambodia. So Cambodia is going the opposite way. And similarly, I think Turkey is the only country which seems to be looking at, and maybe, looking at taking on the Sinovac vaccine, and possibly they'll change course once they recognize the effectiveness of whatever may be the reasons. I don't know. Nobody gives the reasons, in these countries, which is to say, we tried, we tested this, and it didn't kind of work, meet expectations, we changed course. That's the other kind of interesting perspective around trying to, pick needle from the haystack in terms of the specifics of the reasons.
Indonesia has seized Iranian and Panamanian oil tankers who are carrying out illegal transfer of oil in its territory. Again, is there any China angle to this, or is it just these two acting like thieves?
Iran is now flexing its muscles, which is basically to say, hey, I'm going to enrich my uranium. By the way, you put a ban on the sale of my oil. Now I'm going to use all these illegal, what you call tankers to carry and ferry my oil. You guys, something similar happened, as you probably know, in that whole, Iraq and Iraq situation, right? There's a mass from Mosul, Kirkuk. There's a lot of oil tankers going to and fro. It's still happening from the Kirkuk region. So the point is, Iran is saying there is a gap in leadership here as the leadership transitions. So therefore, I'm flexing my kind of muscle in moving those. So where is it going? When you look at those kinds of borders, it's obviously either going to Latin America or it is moving its way towards China in some form. There are only two places that, when you look at the maritime water maps that point to the location of these two tankers, and you saw that they tried to seize the South Korean tanker, which had nothing to do with infiltration, just off the coast of Oman. And the perception is that to see whether U.S. flexes the muzzle, or some people even speculated that they have $7 billion of their money held up and frozen in Korea. So whether this is basically a method by which they can get back their funds.
Lopez Obrador, he is the head of the government in Guatemala. And on 23rd of January, he said that Biden has pledged billions to help development in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador to stem migration from Central America to Mexico. So in other words, a certain individual will finance these caravans, and then the government of United States has to spend more money from its chest to try and keep them where they are. Why doesn't the US government stop the whole funding in the first place, so that these people are disabused of all their notions about how great a country United States is? Yes, it may be, but there is a lot of stuff that has to happen before they can find asylum here.
Yeah. Sir Manuel Lopez Obrador is the Mexican president. Most of these people, sorry, my apologies, and most of the people are stuck in the border of Mexico, right, causing problems for infiltration into Mexico. So he's negotiating with Biden to say, just from an economic upliftment and treatment point of view, why not you kind of give them $5 billion. Apparently, there's some commitment is around $4 billion, whether you can increase it to $5 billion in terms of the aid, so that these people can go away and not become a problem. There are two problems for him. One is a security problem, and the third is the spread of the COVID. Mexico is one of the countries where there is a very rapid rise in the COVID situation. And Mr. Obrador himself is now confirming that he is infected with COVID virus.
Let's take a quick look at COVID, because you kind of segued into that. First off, California is expected to lift its stay-at-home orders as early as today. What it means is that the restaurants will open for external dining, and perhaps the hair salons will also open, and some semblance of normalcy will come back. This is close to 8 weeks now since we had this stay-at-home orders. Let's hope for the best. On the total cases, now they are approaching 100 million, with 2.14 million deaths and 71 million recoveries and about 26 million active cases. United States is still seeing a surge, but some places have stabilized in the US, isn't it?
Well, I think that the way I would like to flip these numbers is, I don't know why people don't say 73 million people have been treated and cured of coronavirus. We recognize there's 2 million deaths and there's 25 million active cases that is being treated, making the total number 100 million. 73 million is not an insignificant number in terms of the people who have recovered. Instead, they keep projecting 400,000 people have died in the United States. 2.2 million people have died. Yes, it is, people are dying of several things, but it's a remarkable job the medical community has done in terms of addressing an issue with very limited data. Now, with regard to United States, your specific point is there seems to be a normalized momentum. The day they removed this, which is lockdowns and shutdowns and restrictions and so on, people seem to be regulating themselves and getting on with the life. It's the same thing that I hear in India. People kind of are dismissive and moving forward, doing things as a normal, following the precautions, right? If you don't follow the precautions, then obviously it doesn't matter. In the flu season, all of us get flu, right? So that doesn't mean we are shutting ourselves down because we have a flu season. On a rainy season, we don't say we shut ourselves out. So I think if the point that you're making is allowing people to resume their normal life, telling them that there is a due process and protocols that need to be followed, I think we will find a way towards solving this. This is exactly the view of the doctors, which is to say, going back to March, April last year, the doctors who were even some of them afflicted with it, they said you cannot keep people shut down and somehow this will go away. It will not be the case. Progressively, as we learn, we need to kind of let people go and do their normal things that they do in their lives.
Let's take a quick look at global markets before we sign off today. Xi Jinping is positioning China as the world's indispensable economy and Biden's greatest challenge. Now we have again, mentioned two sides of the story, and now we think that Biden government is going to continue with the policy of the Trump government in terms of tariffs. Given that that might continue at least in the near future, how do you see this happening between US and China? What do you think is going to happen next?
US and China will be a continuous and continued kind of struggle. China is extremely ambitious and aggressive. Historically, the Democratic administration, or you can say even Obama, Biden, based on the past records, they have not confronted China as they should. And we have a huge issue in South China Sea. We have a growing issue in Taiwan. Effectively, during the Trump period, we have to say we have lost Hong Kong. The freedom and all the things that is associated with Hong Kong is gone. That occurred during the Trump period. So you have seen that there is a kind of a consistent, aggressive expansion attitude of China, and this will be a continued path of cat and mouse game. And whosoever is ahead is ahead. Whosoever is not. But today's virtual address in the virtual World Economic Forum highlights 4 specific points of Xi Jinping. And he is very clear, which is to say, we are the most powerful economy. We have managed COVID better than anybody else. We're the only country in the world which showed plus 2.3% GDP growth in a global world of contracting GDP. And we are invested the least amount of stimulus money in terms of reigniting our economy in adversity. Adversity of challenges posed by the global trade blocs and also the COVID situation. This is his statement today relative to 4 years ago when Trump came on board. I'm using the word 4 years. This is Biden taking stewardship of United States.
Now, she will be delivering the keynote address at the World Economic Forum's first global virtual meeting getting underway. And it is expected that Prime Minister Modi, Yoshihide Suga, President Emmanuel Macron, Chancellor Merkel, EU President are all expected to speak at this meeting. So we will be updating you with the news from this convention, this meeting, on what each leader said and how they visualize the world in the next 12 months or so. There is going to be a Fed meeting. I think on Wednesday you'll have the inputs on the results or the outcomes of that Fed meeting. And this week is big tech earnings, and we expect that the big tech is going to do well. I don't know if Sridharji would like to touch upon that a little bit. Please go ahead, sir.
I think all the tech are expected to do a positive earnings. As far as the Fed is concerned, they don't expect any change in policy of the 0%. They don't see any inflationary trend at all, with so much of money being put into the ecosystem. So I think that it's the same continued kind of a policy. One thing I have to say is the first time this morning, the people are reporting, which is alluding to your point, earlier point that you made, Sriji, is there is some kind of sense of positivism that the COVID is likely to be contained and normalcy to be resumed. It's not the stimulus which is triggering today's upward tick in the markets from tepid move overnight in futures, and today the future is pointing to a high rise because of the cautious, positive buoyancy and optimism in addressing the COVID issue, especially in the United States.
With that, we bring today's program to a close. We'll be back tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thanks for watching. Please do subscribe to our channel and also donate to our cause. Sridharji, as always, a pleasure having you on our program. Namaskar and see you tomorrow.
Namaskar and thank you so much.